Well, hello and welcome to episode 37 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, the fracking agenda in the UK is certainly gathering some pace, despite the fact that the vast majority of the players involved all claim we're not fracking. So who is one to believe? The British government and its push for the exploitation of unconventional gases from shale and coal bed methane, or from the companies who have purchased the petroleum exploration and development licenses, who all claim, it's not us, we're not fracking? Well, that, of course, really is for people to work out for themselves. But we're going to take a look at some of the things that are going on around the country, and we're going to start with our good friends, use that term fairly loosely, of course, at iGas, who, of course, now need to revisit their logo. Because I made the observation last week that the graphic designers may have actually had some remarkable foresight in separating Scotland from the UK in their corporate logo. But, of course, that is not to be, well, not for the time being anyway. So they might want to sort of build a few bridges there between the two triangles on the screen. Well, the bottle of champagne at the moment goes unclaimed, so we're still waiting for iGas investors to tell us how much they have lost. But I'm very pleased to report that the downward trend continues. And if we take a look at the iGas stock over the past 12 months, there we can see that we have the peak back at the beginning of 2014, where it touched on 160. Where I'm sure that there may have been one or two people who made a very, very nice profit. I'm sure there was no insider trading there, of course. They wouldn't do such a thing, would they? But after a rapid climb to 160, obviously this was right in the middle of the Barton Moss campaign, and then the share price has continued on the journey south until this afternoon at 3:30. It was 92.75 pence. Well, in the time it took me to go that screen grab to the next one, it had dropped by a further quarter penny. So here we are. It was. This is looking literally at the last 30 days, and we can see that that's where it dropped under the 100 just before we went on air last week. And then here is today's trend. There must be maybe sort of people realise that the show goes out on a Monday night. And, they get out as quick as they can at the beginning of the day so that they don't have to suffer the losses on Tuesday morning. But the iGas stock closed at 92.45 pennies. It did actually dip during the week at under 90, but made a recovery to 92.5. But with the iGas campaign about to start at Ellesmere Port, and a number of people gathering at Ellesmere Port. And I think we have a picture here. Here we go. This is the gathered body. It's a combination of experienced iGas campaigners. Some people there from Barton Moss. No doubt the forward intelligence of Cheshire police have already got their photographs from Greater Manchester. And already acknowledging them by name. But interestingly, whereas it took about 6 weeks for the local population around Barton Moss to begin to understand and comprehend the magnitude of what iGas were planning to unleash beneath them, at Ellesmere Port, they're already ahead of the curve. And of course, this is just 5 miles north of Upton, where there's been a camp in place basically for about the last nearly 6 months now. Of course, that's preventing Dart Energy from getting on the site there, just 5 miles south of Ellesmere Port. So a lot of people ready to commute from Upton to Ellesmere Port to support the campers at Ellesmere Port and the local community. Now, as we have discussed previously, this is most likely going to be a night campaign, because here's the site. It's accessible from either Junction 8 or Junction 9 on the M53. And basically, if you take the exit from, I believe it's junction 9, and take the fourth exit at the roundabout there, you can't miss the camp. It's at the head of the road, which winds its way down through the industrial estate to the iGas site at the end of the road. So on the basis that if iGas attempt to make any deliveries during the course of the normal working day, that would be incredibly disruptive to the other businesses on the industrial estate. So no doubt the terms of engagement, the memorandum of understanding between Cheshire Police and iGas, which I'm sure we're in the process of getting a copy of that via the Freedom of Information request, although it probably won't be delivered until after iGas have moved their kit off the site there. But I think there's a very distinct possibility, if not a probability, that the deliveries there will be at night. So we anticipate the iGas truck movements starting somewhere probably around about 7 o'clock in the evening and through till about 11 o'clock, and then the trucks exiting between, say, midnight and 4 a.m. So this is going to be a bit of an unusual campaign, but just as the industry can get creative, so can those of us who consider this industry to be an absolute abomination and have absolutely no intention of basically giving it a free ride. The political process at a national level is evidently bankrupt, but interestingly, at the local level, communities are increasingly stating their opposition. And just in the past few days, at the filed council have stated that they will oppose Quadrilla's application to drill at Rosica and Preston New Road. Now, this isn't the final decision, because the final decision will be taken by Lancashire County Council, but nonetheless, the filed council announcing their opposition is very, very significant. And obviously, with the number of objections that have been submitted to date, it will be extremely difficult for Lancashire County Council to grant Quadrilla the planning permission they seek. And if they do, then there will indeed be just cause for a judicial review to be sought, considering the number of letters of objection that have been received. So well done to the people of the filed. You've been on the campaign now, the campaign trail, for a little over 3 years. And I think in the end, it's something like 15,000+ letters of objections that have been submitted. So outstanding there, and certainly leading the way in terms of raising awareness amongst all the local communities there. So meanwhile, in the south of the country, last week, of course, I explained that I had visited the site at Horse Hill, just outside Hawley, about a mile north of Gatwick Airport. And although I was hand-delivered a letter by somebody who clearly knew who I was, when I asked them who they were and who they were working for, they became rather shy. But from that visit, we were able to follow up and establish absolutely that Magellan, although they had delegated drilling operations to a company specifically set up for the operations there called Horse Hill Developments, but Magellan had been telling their investors at numerous presentations over the past 6 to 8 months that they were planning on focusing on the unconventional prospects in the Weald, and had announced that they were going to use the Horse Hill well to gain information on the unconventional geology that they would then put to use elsewhere. This, of course, consequently made the Horse Hill operation effectively a legitimate objective, a legitimate target for the anti-fracking community. Well, this has so concerned David Lenegas, who's the Chief Executive Officer and of Horse Hill Developments, that he seems to have come to some arrangement with Magellan. And just last week on the 18th, so that would have been Thursday, when everyone else, of course, was watching events unfold in Scotland, Magellan posted a press release, and in that they said that the well spudded at Horse Hill on September the 3rd, and surface casing had been set and cemented to a depth of 84 feet. Drilling on the intermediate section of the wellbore is expected to commence imminently, and approximately 6 weeks thereafter, TD terminal depth is expected to be reached at 8,680 feet. Thereby, of course, drilling through the conventional and the unconventional geology. But that press release continued by saying the Horse Hill well, which is designed as a near vertical well that will not be hydraulically fractured, is targeting a conventional Triassic aged gas target. In addition, the well will be used to evaluate various conventional Jurassic aged formations. Horse Hill Developments Limited is operator of the well, in which Magellan has a 35% direct carried interest. Magellan has decided to defer the opportunity at Horse Hill to run a suite of unconventional logs over the Kimmeridge Clay and Liassic formations. Well, I would hazard a guess that the game plan now is simply to take the core samples and then do a laboratory analysis of those core samples rather than run logs. And here's a statement from the president and CEO of Magellan. He said, "We are very pleased with progress to date at Horse Hill, and Horse Hill Developments has proven to be an able operator. The Weald Basin has yielded conventional oil and gas production for decades, and I expect Horse Hill Developments will be a strong partner to Magellan in unlocking value from the conventional prospects at Horse Hill and elsewhere in the world. Their efforts will complement nicely our own pursuit of the attractive, unconventional development opportunities in the Weald." So, consequently, as I pointed out last week, if we look at Balcombe and Horse Hill, then if Magellan actually is able to do the core sample analysis from those two wells, that will give them a pretty good idea of what they might find in their own license of 243 and 234, which they have stated they plan to exploit the unconventional hydrocarbons in 2015. So the bottom line is that if anybody actually believes that Horse Hill has zero relevance to the agenda to exploit unconventional hydrocarbons in the UK, I have some really attractive beachfront property in the centre of Birmingham that you could very well be interested in. So do please contact me for more details. Now, earlier today, I was told that there was, in fact, an awareness exercise at the junction on the 217 and Horse Hill, the road leading up to the Magellan well site. And there was about a dozen or so people there gathered on that junction. And a number of people stopped during the course of the day to seek more information. And there is an awareness event planned in the town of Hawley sometime in the next few weeks. So obviously I will be posting information about that hopefully on next week's edition of Fracking Nightmare. And you can also find that information on the Fracking Nightmare Facebook page. So I was hoping to have a few photographs of today's operation at Horse Hill, but they didn't come through in time. Meanwhile, up in the northeast of the country, we are now just 10 days away from the East Riding Council hearing of the Planning Committee, where they will decide whether or not Rathlin Energy will get its permission to to have a 2-year extension for drilling operations and running its mini fall-off test at the Crawberry Hill site. So here we can see Crawberry Hill when it was actually being drilled a little over a year ago, and the Chief Executive Officer, David Montagu-Smith. Now, as we revealed last week, David Montagu-Smith actually has another role. He is also the chairman of West Northamptonshire branch of the campaign to protect rural England. But as we also revealed last week, David Montagu-Smith has been extremely active in lobbying MPs in Northamptonshire to in turn lobby David Cameron and the Department of Energy and Climate Change to reduce and ultimately remove subsidies on any technology that might compete with the exploitation of unconventional hydrocarbons. And remarkably, David Montagu-Smith not only sees no conflict of interests in his two roles, one as Chief Executive Officer of Rathlin Energy and the other one as Chairman of Campaign for the Protection of Rural England in West Northamptonshire, but he actually considers that raising this observation is defamatory. Well, what we have here is the rebranding of the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, rebranded to the Campaign for the Protection of Rathlin Energy, because, of course, by reducing or removing the subsidies on renewables like wind farms or solar, then, of course, that provides opportunity for Rathlin Energy to maximise the return on its investment on the licence in East Yorkshire. Well, interesting, of course, that David Montagu-Smith is more than happy to take all the subsidies that the government is throwing at the unconventional gas agenda indirectly through incentives to local authorities to embrace the unconventional gas industry in their area. Well, interestingly, Rathlin Energy actually made the national media. Unfortunately, I believe that this article by Jon Val didn't actually make it into the printed version of The Guardian. It was due to appear last Friday, but it was bounced out due to The Guardian on Friday being wall-to-wall Scotland. So this appeared on The Guardian website on Friday. East Yorkshire gas drilling site making locals sick from noxious smells. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that in part 2 of the show. But the final paragraph of Jon Val's article is taken from the Rathlin website. And before we go into the break, and in the break we'll be playing once again the animation of Where Are the Gas Wells in Queensland and showing how rapidly this industry has managed to embed itself in southern Queensland, drilling over 3,000 wells in the past 3.5 years in an area the size of the UK. So if that happens here, we have a very, very serious problem. And of course, we on Fracking Nightmare and the rapidly growing anti-fracking community around the country have every intention of making sure that that doesn't happen, because there is no way we need this country to be suffering from the levels of contamination that southern Queensland is experiencing right now as a result of this industry. So this final paragraph in Jon Val's letter says, Rathlin has been the target of an unrelenting stream of misinformation, unfounded allegations about our objectives, scaremongering and defamatory reputational damage. We have always been clear that fracking has no part in our work or our plans. But the protesters camped at our sites and other vociferous individuals, no idea who they could be talking about there, continue to stage these protests in the wrong place and at the wrong targets. And that's from a statement on the Rathlin website. Well, as I have mentioned in previous episodes of Fracking Nightmare, David Montagu-Smith and Rathlin Energy have been invited to participate in public events in the East Riding of Yorkshire and have consistently refused to do so, stating that they will not enter into any debate with those who, by their utterances and their behaviour, demonstrate that they will not listen to what we have to say. Well, I don't think it's a case of that at all. It's a case of once we explain what it is that we know you're trying to do, you know that not only will you lose all the any moral high ground, but you know that the opposition to your presence in the East Riding will increase exponentially. After the break, we're going to be joined by Jon Mager, the former Director of Education and Children's Services for East Riding Council, and now at the forefront of the anti-fracking campaign in that region of the country. Watch this. Join me in a few minutes' time.
So where are the gas wells? Number 1, Tara Township. Here's the town of Tara. Let's zoom out and find the common radius measurement. So we're looking at about 18 kilometres, so that'd put 6 gas wells within 18 kilometres. So number 2, Chinchilla Township. So here's the township of Chinchilla. We zoom out, we get our 18 kilometres again, which gives us about 10 gas wells within the 18 kilometre radius. Now number 3, Dalby Township. Okay, so the Dalby Township, let's zoom out, get to our measurement tool, and for Dalby we end up with 1 gas well within a 19 kilometre radius. Number 4, the unlucky ones in the gas fields. This is QGC BG Group's Kenya Gas Fields processing plant on the edge of several residential estates and farms. The evaporation ponds alone cover almost 5.5 kilometres. So let's put it in perspective. Let's zoom out from the town of Chinchilla and make a comparison. The entire width from town end to end is 3.21 kilometres. The length is about 3.29 kilometres. The evaporation ponds would cover Chinchilla 1.5 times. Let's zoom out from one of QGC's gas fields. Yes, the dots are gas wells. Yes, the industry isn't even exporting yet. Go to our measurement tool and we have around a 22 kilometre radius. Now I'll give you an example of just how safe human beings will be throughout Australia with the unconventional gas industry. QGC's Catewell cluster is in the heart of a residential estate. So Toowoomba, unconventional gas has its eyes seriously fixed on you and your surrounds. So no gas wells within a 32 kilometre radius, but if we go for a flight out to your west, you'll see the multinational giants aren't too far away. We pass Mount Irving, Mount Moriah, West Prairie, Cecil Plains, Grassdale, Cumberilla. Are you enjoying the flight? Bilby, Kogan, Weambilla. I can't see why people are whinging. This should be in everyone's backyard, shouldn't it? Here's QGC's tenements, Origin Energy's tenements. Oh, hang on, they're actually multinational corporations. Do you want this where you live? And ending with miles. And how about a flyover from Cecil Plains to central Queensland? This is beautiful farming country. Unfortunately, those that are fixated on containment of the unconventional gas global giants are delusional. Prime agricultural land represents easier, more accessible drilling. It is not protected. As the government has indicated, it does not have the right to take a landholder's right to negotiate with a gas company away from them, even if they are on prime agricultural land. Zooming out and moving further north now, you can see we've really been asleep at the wheel. Zooming in, the blurred clusters turn into definable spots, each one potentially causing irreversible damage to the country. I just cannot stress enough that a majority of the unconventional gas wells are not yet in production. The true effects will become undeniable upon export. What's the scale of damage over Queensland so far? The gas industry is only in first gear in one state, covering over 1,000 kilometres long, over 300 kilometres wide. Some very credible projections put total potential unconventional gas well numbers in excess of 200,000 for Queensland alone. It is not the intent of this video to encourage a defeatist thought process. On the contrary, unconventional gas has been heavily wounded in the eyes of the public. Our window of opportunity still exists. Think national, not in my backyard. Stop the first export train, the Surat Basin to Gladstone's Curtis Island, and stop the unconventional gas industry in this country.
and welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, I'm joined online tonight by Jon and Val Mager, and we can see them here on screen. Hi there, Jon and Val.
Hi.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Fine.
We're fine.
Now, just to let everyone know, we have had a few issues with the connection this evening. So if, in the event that it does drop out, we are going to obviously try and get back in touch. So don't run away. Do stay online. Now, I've got a screenshot here from, I think it was early May. And this was when Rathlin were looking to effectively bring the tankers on site to empty the ditches and the overflow tank. And both of you decided that basically you weren't going to let them do that. So, Val, Jon looks as though he's in an altered state of consciousness there. So, Val, could you just talk us through what was happening there?
Yeah, we'd been talking to the protectors. We'd sort of wandered down there to see what was going on, and we were talking to the protectors. And it became gradually apparent that we were sort of standing there on our own, actually, but there was a transporter in front of us and people standing around, and it was, well, an officer came down and started talking to us, telling us that we should move, and Jon by now started meditating, and I just felt I wasn't going to move, because to move would be to admit that what they were doing was right, and I didn't think it was right. And I don't think it's right.
So you were on that picture. You're there talking to the police inspector. What was he actually saying to you at that point?
He was pleading with me, basically. He didn't want to arrest me. It was absolutely clear he didn't want to arrest me. But I think he was being told that he had to arrest me. He kept saying, "Is there anything I can do or say that's going to make you change your mind?" And I kept saying, "No, nothing's going to make me change my mind," and he'd wander away again and speak on the phone and come back again and plead a bit more, saying exactly the same thing. "Can I ask you to go? I don't want to arrest you." And I said, "I know you don't want to arrest me." This went on for some time. And in the end...
We lost the connection. And I think Val was about to say, and in the end, he arrested them.
In the end, he arrested me, but he was most unhappy about it.
And so, I mean, I'm guessing that this isn't an experience that's happened too often in your lives.
No. No. I wasn't even sure it was going to happen, to be honest, Ian. But once the whole set of events, were in motion, it was obvious what was going to happen.
So you were arrested and you were taken to the police station. And what happened once you got to the police station there? How long did it take for you to go through the process?
Well, we were taken to the desk and taken through that process of name and everything and giving information. And that took about 15 minutes, I think. And then we were taken to individual cells. Where we remained for the next 10 hours. Me without my medication. It was extremely unpleasant.
They explained that it was a joke, because, of course, when it came to it, the case was discontinued through lack of evidence. So the whole point really was to bail us with very restrictive bail conditions, which aim to keep us away from both camps.
So it was effectively purely an intimidatory arrest, because, I mean, to say that the charges were dropped on the basis of no evidence, I mean, they were unlawful charges, because there's plenty of video evidence as to what occurred that day, and obviously it would seem that the police and indeed the Crown Prosecution Service did not want those videos shown in court.
I mean, yeah, and the point was the charge was the trade union picketing law, and it was, we were both charged with intimidation and violence. Now, the people that have seen the video can see very clearly that we weren't intimidating or being violent to anyone. And indeed, the driver, in his witness statement, said, "At no time did I feel intimidated." And he also said everything was calm. So really, the whole thing was a put-up. But I think the difficulty they found that day was having turned up with 2 or 3 prison vans and riot vans and 30 or 40 police. That was the first week of the camp, and I think the reason why we were there was it was obvious to us that they had come, in fact, to close the camp down and arrest everybody. We felt it was very important that they understood that there is a large and growing group of locals that think this is completely and absolutely wrong.
Well, I think it's fair to say that here we are some, 4 months on, and you have been absolutely instrumental in helping to raise awareness around the area of East Riding and the villages there. And, you are not the usual suspects. I mean, Roger Helmer, the energy spokesman for UKIP, has claimed that all those opposed to hydraulic fracturing are swampies and eco-Nazis and, other such derogatory terms. And yet here you are, the epitome, forgive me, I don't mean it in any kind of disrespect, quite the opposite. You are the epitome of Middle England. And, John, you were are the former Director of Education and Children's Services for East Riding. And Val, you're a former school teacher, correct?
Yeah, and I was also a National Director of Education working with the government. So, let's put it this way, we have been frequently in our careers checked out. We are typical citizens, and we're very typical of the East Riding. If you talk to the people, there were about 25 people up. We have a regular Monday event at Corbury to support the protectors. We went through that there would be people with all sorts of professional backgrounds. And as you say, I think we need to be very clear. Neither of us have any issues with people.
John, we've just lost you for a second. The call has just dropped. Well, whilst Mike is getting John and Val back, I want to read through a letter that John and Val have written to the East Riding Council. In fact, to Peter Ashcroft, who is the Head of Planning and Development Manager for the East Riding of Yorkshire Council. And I'm going to put the letter up on screen as I read through it, so that we have a permanent record of this. Now, the date for objections to Rathlin's extension, application for a 2-year extension, has now passed. And now this is the period by which the appropriate officers within the council have to review all the letters, whether they are pro or anti, and obviously make a recommendation to the planning committee. But John and Val have identified a number of areas that give them some pretty significant cause for concern. So I want to read this letter in full. So, dear Mr. Ashcroft, this is a formal complaint on the lack of due diligence in the public consultation for planning application, and then the reference number of the case. We write to complain about the insufficient resourcing of the planning department, which means that public scrutiny of the statutory public consultation with regards to planning application for Rathlin's 2-year extension has been prevented. In addition, it is clear that you are not able to arrange appropriate scrutiny by officers and elected members to ensure due diligence and care is in place to protect the interests of East Riding residents. We emphasise that this is in no way a complaint about Shirley Ross, the individual planning officer concerned, who, despite an unacceptable workload, has remained polite and helpful when dealing with our inquiries. Many of those concerned about the public consultation process have been concerned that their objections submitted by the deadline of 11th of September 2014 have not yet appeared on the relevant website showing associated documents for the Rathlin application. Having waited over a week to check that our objections were shown on the website, we contacted Shirley Ross this morning, and that is the morning of the Monday 22nd of September 2014. She explained that workload meant that she had not been able to read, check and upload the objections. She was concentrating on writing the report. She hoped to upload the remaining letters of objection by the end of the week. She pointed out that she had other reports to write as well and was doing the best she could in the circumstances. So, how can Shirley Ross achieve due diligence on behalf of the East Riding of Yorkshire Council with such a workload? For example, how can she draft an accurate report if she has not been able to read and assess all the objections before writing it? How can she pass on new objections to the applicant in time for them to provide appropriate responses? We pointed out that in one case, the published response of your Senior Environmental Health Officer, Ian McKechnie, was deliberately misleading. He stated, "I have also discussed noise issues with residents of nearby properties who confirmed that they had no grounds to complain during the drilling phase." This is directly contradicted by the objection from Mrs. Haywood of Cold Harbour Farmhouse, the nearest neighbour to the Crawberry Hill drilling sites. She writes, "While test drilling was very noisy, not just the drilling noise, the worst problem was at night when pipes would bang against each other. Had Mr. McKechnie discussed noise issues with neighbours before writing his report, he could not have written his response." What is more significant as evidence to support this complaint is that Mrs. Haywood's objection was placed on the website in error because it had not been checked first. We phoned Shirley Ross this morning, Monday 22nd of September, to check why Mrs. Haywood's letter, which I read and printed out last week, was no longer on the website, and she confirmed that 4 letters had been removed because they went on without being checked first. The train of events confirms why your process is unfit for purpose. Objectors and supporters of the planning application are entitled to see all the relevant documents. So are elected members, especially those directly involved as local members or members of the planning committee. If your normal process had been followed, Mrs. Haywood's letter would still not be available online, and we would not be able to write to her or to Mr. McKechnie to point out that there was a direct misrepresentation of a relevant material consideration in reaching a decision on the application. In addition, the officer responsible for drafting the report would not be aware of the need to get her facts checked on this issue, especially if the Cold Harbour Farm objection was not seen by her until after the report was printed for the planning committee. In summary, we have presented evidence that without being able to read all the letters of objection and support and the responses from relevant agencies and East Riding Yorkshire Council officers, it is not possible to exercise our democratic right as residents to scrutinise information sent in by the deadline of 11th of September 2014. In addition, the officer responsible for drafting the report would not be aware of the need to get her facts checked on this issue, especially if the Cold Harbour Farm objection was not seen by her until the report was printed for the planning committee. We have been informed by Liz Russell, on behalf of Diane Hindhow, that the report to the planning committee must be signed off by you by the morning of Wednesday 24th of September in order to be on the website by that afternoon to allow the required 5 working days before the planning committee of 2nd of October 2014. It is clear that due to insufficient resourcing of the officer team, you cannot ensure that all responses received by the deadline of 11th of September 2014 can be checked and analysed, so not all relevant material considerations can be assessed in time to meet the deadline of 24th of September. It does not appear that you have any alternative but to postpone the report to the next planning committee meeting so that a proper process of drafting can be completed. Yours sincerely, Jon and Val Mager. So, Jon, are you back with us?
Yeah.
Jon, that is an excellent letter, and clearly, basically, you, in summation, the democratic process has failed abysmally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you and I agree in that democracy is not about voting people in to the local council every 3 years and they just get on with it. And the council knows that. That's why they have this process of public consultation, and that's why they supposedly publish all relevant documents on the website. And, you know, the website is very useful because you can see every document. But in this case, so many people have said to me, why can't they see the letter of objection that I've sent in? Why can't they see their own letters? Val's letter, I've had an acknowledgement, Val hasn't had an acknowledgement, and so on. And the whole that example of the nearest neighbour objecting, but the officer saying, I've contacted them and there are no objections. Active democratic involvement means that we can look at this and point these sort of things out. You know, I'm not defending Rathlin, but Rathlin too have the right to see what's going on and to give, I mean, I wish they would give detailed and specific answers. As you pointed out in your broadcast tonight, they just hide behind a lot of rubbish about mischief makers like you and Val and me, when of course we're not. We're just very concerned residents in our case that have found out a bit about fracking and confirmed our worst fears and want to do something about it. But the basic point is that democracy requires active involvement by citizens to make it work, and that's all we want to do. And we can't do that if this information is withheld simply because of workload.
Well, sadly, Jon, of course, you know, the version of democracy that we have here in the UK actually relies on the complete opposite. You know, the version of democracy that we have here in the UK requires non-participation. So, you know, those whom we elect, whether it's local, district, national, whatever, you know, they want the votes, but then from that point forward, they want everybody just to butt out, get out of their way, and let them do whatever it is that, you know, effectively they're instructed to do. And of course, in this particular issue, it's coming back to bite them, because people are saying, you know what, it's time that we actually started to make the process work as it's supposed to work. And if you're not going to permit it to work, then what are we left with? And what you're left with is getting arrested in front of Rathlin's gate.
That's right. And it's very striking how many people are saying, and people that have not got any background of involvement in local or national politics, saying this is all wrong. It can't be right that this is happening, whether they're talking about fracking or TTIP and issues like this. And the number of people, when it's quite a strange experience to have people coming up and just saying thank you so much for what you're doing, and how can they get involved and so on. So I think, and there's the background of the Scottish referendum and so on, it's very clear that politics in this country is actually changing, and more people are realising that if they don't like what's going on, they can't rely on elected politicians to sort it out. They've got to turn the telly off, they've got to start talking to people, and they've got to get involved in some way.
Now, I mean, you've been obviously involved in this for you know, some months now. You know, what is your view of the changing attitudes in that time amongst the people of the East Riding?
Well, as I say, Val will talk about sort of herd networks and so on, but from what I'm seeing, each time we go to a meeting, there's more and more people turning up. I mean, you sort of finished your current involvement in the East Riding with a very large meeting. And what was striking about that meeting, Ian, was that I would say 3/4 of an audience of over 160 people, that was the first time those people had come to a public meeting on any subject. They hadn't even been in that meeting hall before. And the number of people that came up at the end and said, thank you very much for that information. It's shocking. I'm going to go away and tell people and so on. Now this is, you know, you understand from my background, I've been to lots of public meetings in the past. This is a very different world, and what I would say to all the main political parties is that if they don't respond quickly, they're really going to lose it completely with a population that really has had enough of being told what to do and being told leave it to the elite. You can't leave it to the elite. People have got to get involved.
And would you say that the physical presence of the camp has had a positive impact, or otherwise?
It's been a constant reminder to people, I think, Ian, that there is this issue and it's not going away. And I think even though more people have got involved, I think it's still important that the protectors stay there until we know what the outcome of this meeting is going to be, and then into the future if need be. They're a kind of symbol.
They literally are protectors. If you read the committee report, it describes Crawberry Hill as an area of high landscape value that needs, quote, protection. It goes on to say that the drilling site is situated on a source protection zone for drinking water for the whole of Hull and the East Riding. And the simple fact is that the only people that have been at the forefront of protection are the protectors up there at Crawberry Hill, because the Environment Agency and the local council and the Health and Safety Executive and DEC and Yorkshire Water have not made a single visit to the site since they started work there. So the only protection has been those protectors, and they are wonderful people. They're putting up with harsh conditions living by the roadside. They're putting up with idiots going by telling them they've got to get a job when they're doing a fantastic job of reminding all of us that the site's there, the site should not be there, and they're monitoring, both at West Newton and at Crawberry Hill. They are monitoring, and so, for example, this weekend the RSPCA have been involved formally at West Newton because of the large number of small mammals that are dropping dead around the site. They've taken some of the animals away for investigation and promised to come up with a formal report on the causes of death, probably related to either gas and or water. Similarly, as you know, we were able to report on the drowning of 2 protected species brown hares at the Crawberry site. These are all accumulating bits of evidence, but without the protectors on site, well, if the protectors weren't there, we probably wouldn't be here talking to you tonight, to be honest.
So, I mean, obviously there are other communities now that are starting to become aware of the potential impact of this industry in their area. And I mean, just a few miles north of you guys, about 35, 40 miles north, is the Vale of Pickering. Now, to all intents and purposes, it might as well be, another continent, because I think there was a couple of people who actually made the journey down to the Beverley event that you referred to a couple of weeks ago. But really, there hasn't been a lot of contact to date between the East Riding anti-fracking community and the North Yorkshire anti-fracking community. And the North Yorkshire community are just starting to come to the realisation, of course, that there's going to be another attempt to drill a well at Ebbston. But beyond that, we're even seeing the next stage of perhaps this agenda, because at Ebbston, they've actually been given permission to re-inject the waste into the geology. And this is, a step in this agenda that is causing increasing concern.
Well, first of all, of course, there's an interesting family connection, because that's where Val grew up, and her sister still lives in the area, and I know is going to the meetings, and Val's brother, who worked on the land all his life and is extremely concerned. So that's the point about talking to family, and family getting involved, and people doing something about their sense of frustration. So there's a family connection with North Yorkshire. But, I mean, interestingly enough, Ian, I haven't had time to tell you, but because the North Yorkshire group based at Harrogate have said, where can they get information? And I made the point of telling them that, first of all, they should be watching your programme and watching your website, but also looking at all the resources that the Frack Off, Rathlin East Yorkshire Frack Off group and Frack Free East Riding group have pulled together. So there is some networking going on. The other obvious point to make is the difference between East Riding and the North Yorkshire group is that this is an application to drill into an area of outstanding national beauty, you know, that's led to a different planning process, and it'll be very interesting to see how that works. Final point, my understanding is that is an area of complex geology, so the idea of drilling and disposing of waste into that drill hole is absolutely insane. But I mean, you know, we've offered full support, and we would certainly go up and do anything we can to help them on there.
Now, a word has come back to me from via a circuitous route that there is some concern amongst the people of the Vale of Pickering about a camp. And they say, no, we don't want a camp. Now, I actually have advised them that I've heard this at every location. I mean, you know, we heard it at Balcombe in the early days of the Balcombe campaign. We heard it on Barton Moss. You know, we heard it initially in East Riding. And now again, obviously, here at in North Yorkshire. What would your counsel be to those residents of the Vale of Pickering who have concerns about a camp manifesting in their part of the country?
What I would say is that the protectors are there to work with the community, and the important thing is to establish contact with the protectors and have a very clear understanding that this is a partnership, that it's working together with people that will have a lot of experience, but also a huge amount of commitment. It takes fantastic commitment to camp by the roadside through the winter with all sorts of unpleasantness at times, but also a lot of, you know, warm support from the local community. And the other insight I would share is that Simon Taylor, the PR expert employed locally by Rathlin, made a point of going to every house in West Newton, and his message was, what you really need to do is get a group together to get rid of those protectors. Now, the reason why they wanted to get rid of the protectors is because they knew that that was the most effective method for scrutinising what was going on a day-to-day basis. The other point I'd make is what the police liaison officer said to the protectors in the first month. He said, if there were 100 people here, there is nothing we could do. And that's the message from Bentley, Australia, isn't it? And you're not going to get boots on the ground. You're not going to get people turning up if you don't have a presence.
It's just a constant reminder, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you characterise the East Riding. It never fails to surprise me that if you're sitting up at Crawberry or having a cup of tea and you see the most remarkable you know, recent registered Mercedes and Audis, very, very nice cars drawing to a halt, and people getting out with bags of shopping. You see the number of white vans that go by with people in the building trade doing a thumbs up and sounding the horn. You need a visible presence to be a focus for people that may not necessarily be able to turn up and give as much support that they would like. But it's a way of people showing where they stand and what they can do. And that letter that you read out from us, you can't get the information with which to challenge the agencies involved if you haven't got people that are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, you know, it's not always easy, because a lot of the protectors will come with their own ideas from their previous experiences, and you know, the message that we've shared, and I think successfully, with the protectors at the camp now, is that Hull and East Riding, like Rydale, is quite an unusual rural area, but with quite a big retired and professional population. So it's a very challenging environment compared to, say, Barton Moss. But I'm sure the protectors will adapt to that, but whatever you do, you need a constant presence at a site.
Well, and as you say, the demographic is perhaps, well, certainly is very different from, say, the area around Salford and Barton Moss. But, one of the most significant factors is that, the demographic of that area, there are a large number of retired people. And actually, that may be the last generation that has independent financial means. They actually own their own property and don't have to work to supplement their pension incomes. And so consequently, they do have that most remarkable of resources, which is time. And I mean, certainly the events that I did in East Yorkshire just before coming back south, the one in Bishop Burton and, of course, the one at the Toll Gavel in Beverley, really without the commitment of those retirees and the flyering that they did, as did many of the people at the camp as well, then I can't remember, was it 5,000 flyers were distributed around the Beverley area, to get an audience of about 160. But that was, a tremendous effort by those people to get the information out. And even those that didn't come to the meeting, they would have still got the flyer and hopefully will have had sufficient curiosity to go, check out for themselves to get more information.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. What is pleasing is the number of, the demographic in Beverley in particular is very much people coming to establish family arrangements and good schooling and so on. So it tends to be people 30 plus married couples, but there's a good proportion of them now getting engaged as well. Ironically, the police have sent us a strange letter giving us advice about these solidarity gatherings we have on a Monday night, and suggested that if we swap to the daytime, more people would be able to turn up. In other words, recognising that it's a lot of old fogies like us, but there wouldn't be anybody there that has actually got a job, It's quite ridiculous. There are people that are working, that are doing their best, and the reason why we're holding the Solidarity event early evening is that people have got the opportunity to get home from work and then come up. I mean, people will bring their kids up tonight, which is very good as well. So, all of this comes back to your first question, which is, without a protection camp, without a focus, a place where people can drop in, have a cup of tea, and find out for themselves what's going on, I don't think that would work on the basis that we were writing the letters and doing all the stuff that we are doing in terms of planning and complaining to the council and so on. That's important, but you need the people on the ground. And you do have to have at the back of your mind very clear understanding that when push comes to shove, non-violent direct action is perfectly legitimate. We have a right of assembly, we have a right to free speech, and we have the right to take appropriate non-violent direct action if that is what is needed. And if it means that you end up with 400 or 500 local residents, or you end up with farmers using their tractors to make it clear that they do not want this highly controversial, this very dangerous process to be taking place to ruin their livelihoods, to ruin their local environment. You can't get there without a protection camp, without the expertise that the protectors have.
Well, John, we're right out of time. John and Val, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And let me just make the observation that even a few years ago, if anybody had suggested to me that there would be three people with our respective backgrounds discussing the prospect of direct action against a government-sanctioned industry, I would have suggested that they were in need of some serious medication. But sadly, that's what it has come to. And the unconventional gas industry has left a trail of horrendous devastation wherever it has been permitted to get its bits in the ground. And the increasing reports of negative health impacts on all life, not just human life, but all life, are coming into the public domain. So we have to do what we need to do. As somebody has put on the forum here, go with your gut. And the bottom line is that your gut tells you this isn't right. However you look at it, we need to do whatever it is we need to do to shut this industry down. And let's start with the UK. Thank you and good night.